What have you seen from Preston Stone so far?
Preston's doing a good job of, the first time taking it over as his team. He's coming out here and he's got high energy, which he had before, but when you're the guy and everybody's looking at you, like now you're holding you accountable. Like, what are you doing every day? How are you working? How are you working out? What are the accountabilities, that kind of deal. And so he brings some energy, some juice to the offense, and he's learning how to grasp with not always throwing the best ball or not always making the best read, like how to just forget and move on. And that's been the biggest thing I've seen this spring, through the first 6 days, is like his ability to, okay, hey, threw a ball, bad ball, great. Or I threw a great ball, good. Like, just keep playing. That's kind of been our focus throughout this spring with him.
When you talk about it being his team, a year ago at this time, you had a guy in that role who was coming up on a 5th year.
Yeah.
How does that make it different for you and the coaching staff to have a much younger guy in that role?
Yeah, we were very lucky to have Tanner, and Tanner he had played at obviously at Oklahoma, then he played the year before. And what Tanner had over the other guys is he had a lot of experience of failure, in the sense of he had thrown the bad passes for those many years before to learn to not do other things, not do it again, right? And so what we have to do now is build those other guys up and give them those kind of experiences so that they can, have the freedom to fail at practice and to learn from it, right? And where Tanner already had that built up, and so that's the goal now, is to try to build those reps with those guys so they learn what not to do, and not to make the same mistakes over and over again. So.
What's that room like? Obviously, Kevin coming in with a little more experience now, and then obviously bringing Alex into that group.
Yeah, Kevin's been really good. He's sharp. He works his butt off. He's getting bigger, and he's growing. He was almost like a young kid last year. Now he's kind of coming in his own, and he's comfortable. He's starting to feel comfortable in what we're doing. He's starting to be able to give hand signals and do that. All the things that you see a guy that's maybe in his 2nd to 3rd, 4th year, like what you're looking for, and that, it's really his only 2nd camp. And then, Alex has been great. He's an older veteran guy. He's played in the Big Ten. He understands to come in a room, and he can kind of be in a mentor role with those guys because he's experienced it. He's been on the road in the Big Ten. He's seen things. He can sit down with those guys. He's been very supportive. So, it's the room's changed a little bit. When you losing Tanner and Tanner leaving, and Preston stepping into that role, and then you got Kevin that's eager to learn and eager to listen, and then you got Alex there as a guy that's been around, and so it's kind of a different type of room than we had last year, which is always good. So
at the press conference on signing day, Coach Lashley talked about Alex and talked a little bit about his talent, but said he's been in a very different offense, so he obviously has a lot to learn. What did you like about what you saw in him that made you want to bring him in?
So when we broke down his film, we're like, hey, we see a guy that can make the throws that we ask our guys to make. And so you sit there and go, okay, hey, he may play in a different offense, but he does throw the go ball really well. He does throw some out routes and that kind of stuff that we do a lot. You kind of see it in him, and you're like, okay, if we can get him here and get him in our system and get him rolling and get him, things figured out in his mind, he can execute what we do. And that's really what we wanted. The last couple of years, we've only had 3 quarterbacks on scholarship, and so we've gotten down to the 3rd guy, and you're like, okay, what are we going to do after this, and what's going to happen? When you bring in as much talent as we have around him, you want to have a guy that can come in and distribute the ball, right, if something does happen. And so he has that ability. Now, offensively, he's a very smart kid. He's very, very smart. He picked up the offense like that. He doesn't have to come up and do kill calls or anything like that like he had to do before, and so he has a freedom of playing. I'm like, dude, what you're going to have to feel now is that you don't have to do make these decisions at the line of scrimmage and all that stuff. You just got to get reps and playing ball, playing, that kind of deal.
With Preston, getting that experience last year, how much did it help give you guys an idea of what different elements he might bring to the offense in an actual game versus just kind of planning with him?
Yeah, so you kind of see him when he gets in the live fire, and you see him, and we talked about today, like, him improvising. And you didn't see it until, like, at practice, we blow the whistle so quick, or, the plays get extended out, and there's really no consequence for the defense when he does scramble and do that kind of stuff. And then you see him in the game, and you're like, okay, hey, he takes off versus Cincinnati, and you're like, okay, hey, like, okay, this is what this guy can do. He can not only be an elite passer, but he can create long enough to have maybe extend plays down the field. And so, being in practice is so much different than the games. And that's the thing that you kind of lose at practice. Like, okay, what would this really look like? And if luckily enough, we got to see some of that stuff last year from him.
we're not QB coaches, but Kevin looks bigger. It also looks like he's throwing harder.
Yeah.
Or is he more confident?
Well, there's a deal. There's kind of a running joke in our room. Like, do you want to be the guy that plays catch with Kevin because he has a very good arm. He can rip the ball. He's got big hands. I mean, he can manipulate the ball really well. He's a young kid, so I think his ceiling is very, very high. I mean, he is just now hitting this deal and taking off. And so, as he puts weight on, he's only been here for like 9 months, something like that. And so you get him in the weight room, he's eating a lot, you know what I mean? And like he's got braces, so he's trying to navigate all his braces as a young kid. You forget these guys are young kids. I mean, 18, 19-year-old dudes but man, he's growing and maturing right in front of us, and it's good stuff.
You mentioned the weapons. Does that put pressure on a quarterback knowing he's got all of that around him, that he's got to be good? Or does that take some off knowing that he's got some really good guys around him that can maybe make up for some things?
I think what it does is it changes your mindset of like, I may not just have one go-to guy, I may have 4. And if you think about it as a quarterback, I'm not thinking about now, hey, I got to get the ball to this guy. It's just whoever is open, I can get the ball to and they can go score at any time. And so that's what bringing in really good players do, And so, there's some freedom in that with the quarterbacks. Where as a quarterback, if you've got one main guy, it's like, okay, am I maybe focusing too much on him? That kind of deal. Am I forcing the ball to him? And luckily, we had a guy that was really good. Obviously, Rasheed was like unreal, but like, you have 4 of maybe potentially kind of guys like that, or maybe 5, 6, and then you're like, okay, dude, just wherever the ball naturally takes you, wherever the defense takes you, we can score from that. And you don't have to force things. You don't have to force the issue or anything like that.
When you look at the quarterbacks, you have Preston, Kevin. Obviously, everybody has slightly different skills and strengths. How much do you and Coach Woods and Coach Lashley tailor the offense for them, and how much do you ask them to try to replicate what Tanner did?
Yeah, we don't ask them to replicate anything that either one of them do. We tailor what we do on offense is what they do good, and we've always had that. And I think I've said this before that what we strive to do and what we put our name on is that our offense is what our quarterback can do. We're a quarterback-friendly offense, so we have a guy that maybe is more mobile. We're going to do stuff that maybe helps him out more. If we've got a guy that's more of a drop-back passer, we may drop back and throw the ball. We're going to do what our guys do well. We're going to adjust. We're not going to force the talent to adjust to us, that kind of deal.
You've had to go to 3 quarterbacks back-to-back years now. Do you have prayer beads to keep everyone healthy? You knock on wood now, or?
No, it just, that's how sometimes it happens, We've been fortunate enough that we've had, 3 really good quarterbacks the last couple of years, and so luckily the next guy that shows up, and you guys have seen him, Kevin shows up against Memphis and Tulsa. He takes us on a 98-yard touchdown or a 92-yard touchdown drive as a true freshman against Memphis on a rainy day like it kind of was today. You're like, holy cow. And so we've been lucky enough to have guys like that, guys like Tyler and Jake and at Miami. And so we've surrounded ourselves with good players, and good players make it right. So.
Did Kevin's development, has it surprised you at all? Or the fact that he was able to step in and be so stable last year and then obviously get bigger and more confident this spring?
Not in the surprising of like his talent level. I think it's the surprising of like freshmen that can come in and kind of have the guts and not fold in the situation. I think sometimes you get out there and a freshman can be blinded by the pressure. You're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And he was calm, cool, collected, right? And I think it goes back to like where he played at, right? He played for a winning program, right, at SOC, and like to do that with good players. Like the moment wasn't too big for him because he had been in those moments before. And so, and I've said this before, but with the quarterbacks, it's not if you're going to play, it's when you're going to play. So like, are you preparing yourself for when the time comes? That kind of deal. So.
How rare is that? Have you had other freshmen who've been that poised that early?
When we were at Miami, Tyler was a redshirt freshman, but he kind of had the COVID year where he wasn't really, he missed like 40-something days or some deal, and he came in after De'Eric and got hurt, and so he came in, threw for like 6 straight 300-yard games, 3 touchdowns, some national record or all that. So, we have had that before. Now, I will say this. It goes back to like what we do on offense. We cater to what our quarterbacks can do. So, like, we're not going to get in the game and call plays for Kevin that fit Tanner or Preston, those guys before. And so, same thing, we did the same thing in Miami. So.
You mentioned tailoring an offense. In terms of Keldrick Luster's eventual game plan, is it copy and paste De'Ara King. And
there's only one De'Ara King.
Yeah, yeah.
And you guys have seen that. I mean, was he undefeated right now in the
played
XFL?
well.
It's I mean, winners win, right? And that guy's a winner. Keldrick will be when he gets here is to evaluate what he can do for us. Like kind of throw him in the fire, see what he can do, and then say, okay, hey, let's see, what do you feel good about? Let's do this. You know what I mean? That kind of deal. You kind of feel like you typecast people by just their abilities and that kind of stuff, but you really got to see them at practice, and then you kind of narrow it down. You know what I mean? We'll go out and practice and we'll just throw things at them just to see how they do, and then you get in game plan mode. You start shrinking everything, and you sit there and go, hey, what do you like? You like to run this? Does this feel good about it? No, yes, no, and you start crossing things off.
Gotcha.